Welcome to another Walt update. I'm back at the workshop and I've got some time-lapse videos to share with you of my progress. As you can see, I'm cracking on with finalising the insulation and building some wooden framework for the windows so I can finally mount the internal blinds that hold them to the van walls. The wooden frames are also useful because I'm going to be screwing the ply lining, which will have the vapour barrier mounted behind it, which I will staple gun to these wooden battens. So I'm just spending some time forming them to the inside of the van and screwing them in so that there's some structural integrity there. This is one of my favourite new tools, a pocket hole drill, which allows you to drill vertically through the end of a beam and then into whatever support you've got there. Can't wait to be past this stage of cutting this insulation. As brilliant as it is to add insulation board rather than relying on that ghastly rock wool, which I have to admit I've also been using, it does go everywhere. When you cut it, you literally get a shower of the stuff everywhere, so it'd be quite nice to get past this and to seal it all off and to sweep the van and clean the workshop, because it does tend to go everywhere. But it's an essential tool. I'm covering every single space where there's a recess in the van walls, every single space where there's a recess in the roof, between the joists up the side and overhead, and all around the windows, the new window frame. I don't know if that time-lapse came out, but I just wanted to capture the transition from bare metal panel van interior to somewhat sound deadened, mostly insulated base for a camper interior. So yeah, nothing's glued in yet. All these panels are going to come out and be pinned and glued, because the last thing I want is them squeaking behind the walls, obviously, but most of it's cut to measure. I've cut the insulation out for the bed, foot and head. That's to allow the inset of the width of the bed across the van so that I can sleep across the back. I realised I'm going to mount some unwin rails to the outside of the van, so I'm going to have to cut holes to fix bolt heads behind that, but it should go back on alright. And then yeah, so once it's all glued in, I've got a roll in the front there in the cab of padded insulation, which will be my moisture barrier. That will go over everything, and then I'm going to line with hardboard. Oh, I can't believe I'm getting towards that phase. There's still plenty to do in the roof. I've got welding to do, fit the skylight, but most of the rest of the windows are ready to be glued in. The frames are built, ready to be glued onto the van walls. Yeah, progress. So yeah, we can see how much space I've got to work with at the moment, which is just such a joy. This is an exciting phase because it's a big transition between bare panel van with lots of echoes and feeling cold to somewhat sound deadened and insulated interior that's starting to feel a little bit warmer, less echoey. It's quite a job pinning these ceiling boards. I did find some panel pins thanks to one of Greg Virgo's videos, but they only worked for quite thin insulation and didn't actually do a good enough job to hold these panels onto the ceiling. So no tips there really. Just make sure you've got a good contact when you screw your lining boards up to the battens that you'll have hopefully mounted to the ceiling in the same way that I have. Of course, the key thing is to do a lot of thinking about services and electrical requirements at this stage, because you want to make sure you run any cables you might need and or water pipes before you seal the whole lot away. You can of course run cables and pipes inside cupboards, etc., but sometimes it's just easier to get them out of the way. Decided to replace the wing mirrors to slightly more convex truck mirrors. Still need to get a blind spot mirror on that arm. These are just wind deflectors. Amazing how even the little things take time. Covers the wheel arches. These will have rock wool insulation behind them. Here I'm just measuring up the head and foot apertures for the bed so I can build a framework out of plywood. This was a little bit of a hack. The front window was a second-hand one out of a caravan. I had to build a framework out of several layers of thin ply to make sure it was mounted in there and gripping the wall flush enough. I then used a grip filler to attach all of the fibre boards to the walls. I added, in some cases, a butyl tape to the inner rims of the window frames, but in most cases just a mastic sealant, Sikaflex, and then screwed through the inner frame into the outer frame, thus creating a clamp for the window onto the van wall. It was then just a question of filling the gaps with either insulation board or rock wool or a mix of the both on the inside to make it flush, ready to accept the lining. This window is in an aperture where there was once a vertical beam, so it was always a bit of a worry that I was going to get this flush enough with the van wall. Turned out quite well in the end. Not an awful lot too much more work than installing a window in a panel really, after I'd fortified the wall below it with a steel joist. Here I'm mounting unwind rails into the side walls. This will be to hold things like potentially jerry cans, but probably sand tracks, max tracks, anything that you might want to be kept on the outside of the van that's not too bulky. This is the aperture for the horse box window, which will be in the shower room. This is actually just glued on with butyl tape, a couple of layers, and then clamped from the inside for a couple of days just to make sure it was good and strong, but there's no internal frame for this one, so just need to make sure it's safe. And then the final window installation was in the rear door. Same principle, all a bit custom this one, didn't have an inner frame, still need to get a blind for it, but it went on well. Again, a mix of butyl tape and sealant from the sealant gun. This was quite a find, this window. It fitted in the original aperture from the OEM window, and had to make my own wooden frame, but actually the internal fly screen and blind fitted perfectly. I was very pleased. Check it out, it's extra dark in here because I've got my 3 blinds in and closed. It's getting a bit of a nighttime feel. It's a good couple of hours work to get that done, but what a difference. Right, well yesterday I had a good day. I had a full day on Walt. Lola went to her friends after school, and I've just come back today for a few hours because there's a few jobs that aren't too messy that I can do, and as you see it's relatively clean here after a tidy up yesterday. I had a day of sealant and various other disgusting chemical products to seal things in, like the windows. This is a really thick black butyl based sealant behind this. Still needs a little bead along the top there, I think, where I'm sure it'll leak if it wants to. So yeah, all the windows are in, and just checking that the blinds are working, that kind of thing. There's a few little quirks and some moderations to make as I go, but it's really starting to look more tidy and coming together, and it smells different. It smells new, so that's a good sign. Gone for now, anyway, is the smell of welding and ground metal, which is just the most disgusting smell, and you find it very hard to get rid of. So yeah, we've now got well, today I've got I'm going to start on the lining. It's really sound deadened in here as well, which is great, and of course the floor's yet to go in, so more to do in that front. But yeah, so I've got this bubble wrap. This is going to act as my vapour barrier, and I've got some silver tape to ensure that the connection is completely airtight, and I'm just going to drop sheets of that all around the van now and staple gun them into the wood where I've got the battens. I need to work out if I need any more battens, and then mark up on the inside of the bubble wrap where the beams are, so I can screw the lining material into the beams once the vapour barrier is up, the moisture barrier, sorry. So yeah, I'm really, this is going really well so far. Feels much better than my other two previous van conversions in terms of longevity, durability, professionalism, the kit I'm using, what you can buy online today, all that kind of stuff. So it's yeah, it's proving to be good fun so far. So let's do a little bit more time lapse. So this is the start of the vapour barrier, the moisture barrier. It will be sealed on the sides and at the top and the bottom by silver tape, just to make sure there's no gap for air movement. Here I am staple gunning it to the joists that I've put behind, and then carefully marking up where the joists are using a sharpie on the inner wall. It's not actually insulation, it's thin, but it will do the job to seal the van, and it's not much more expensive than just a sheet of plastic. So I've started on some wiring. I figured that if I had appliances or requirements for 12 volt or 240 volt at a high level, I'd at least run the cables across the roof from my power plant, which will be behind the passenger seat. So this is me trying to conceal the cables by using cable ties with battens screwed into the battens that I've got across the roof. I've always wanted to go into space, man. Starting to look a bit like Apollo 13 in here. Like that though. Tidying up at the end of another day. Good fun, never enough time. Can't wait to get Walt on the road. See you next time.